Hey everyone, thanks for watching. I'm Darin, Starr, owner and coach here at 5 Star Physique, and today we are going to address the thing that tends to get in the way first for most people when it comes to sticking with their plan in the long term, and that is meal prep. So today I'm going to give you my 5 best tips for making your meal prep faster, tastier, more precise, and more foolproof. All right, now before we dive in, hit that thumbs up button, scroll down, leave a comment and tell me what your least favorite part of meal prep is, because hey, we all have one, right? For me, it's the fact that pretty much every time I do it, it feels like I just did it the day before. Whether you're following a meal plan or a macro-based plan, in bodybuilding, meal prep is just a fact of life. Really, there's no way around it if you want to do this effectively in the long term. There are many people, and I used to put myself in this category as well, who would spend several hours on a weekend afternoon doing their meal prep for the week in an attempt to be organized. And I'm sorry, but screw that. I have a lot of better things to do with my time, and I suspect that you probably do as well. There are many videos that you can watch out there on YouTube that take a 4 or 5 hour meal prep session that somebody has done, and they've edited it down into about a 30-minute video or so. That is not what this is. Instead, what I'm going to do is show you a few simple tricks that you can do to cut down on the time you spend doing your meal prep, make your life a little bit easier, and make your food taste better. So let's get started. Tip number 1, blazing fast chicken. Now, the staple protein in a lot of bodybuilding diets is chicken, so let's just start there. If you're not using a slow cooker or a crock pot for this, then you're making it a lot harder than it has to be. The only real trick is figuring out the timing of everything. So let's assume that it takes 4 to 6 hours in the slow cooker to actually get fully cooked, and then you've got to add on to that, to the front end of that, some additional time to defrost if you're pulling it out of the freezer, and then you know when to take action. Now, the trick here is to do very little to the raw chicken when you're putting it in the slow cooker. I typically just add a couple of herbs, seasonings sprinkled on as I'm loading it up, keep it nice and simple, and then turn it on and walk away. There's no need to do anything like trimming off the excess fatty bits with scissors or anything like that, because after you cook it, all that stuff's just gonna fall away anyway. Bonus tip. Now, once you unload the slow cooker, there's going to be a lot of, leftover fluid in there. I call it chicken juice. Dogs love that spooned over their dog food. If you're not going to be home when the chicken is done cooking, it's important that your slow cooker have a timer feature on it so that you can specify a cooking duration, high or low temperature, and then once it reaches that time, it will go into a warming mode where it's just keeping the contents warm until you're there to tend to it. Now, bonus tip number 2, because I'm loaded up with them today. When you are portioning this out, it's cooked and now you're portioning out a meal. When you do that, you want to hand shred it by pulling it apart with your fingers. Chicken cooked in a slow cooker and then left in a refrigerator for a couple days has a tendency to turn into a rubbery hockey puck kind of consistency. However, hand shredding it fixes that problem. Tip number 2, mass, not volume. Now, a lot of foods like rice, oats, peanut butter, various oils, etc., on plans they're going to be listed with volumetric measurements. A cup of this, a tablespoon of that, etc. I do that oftentimes in plans that I write as well, but I'm telling you, from the practice of actually measuring this stuff out on a daily basis, it's way easier to use the scale. It's much more precise, and it's going to save you a lot of time and hassle in finding and cleaning out your measuring devices all the time. So a few quick tips. If you're measuring out 1/3 cup of cream of rice or a cup of oats or something like that, the first time, put it in the measuring cup and then take your bowl or plate or whatever and put it on a zeroed out scale and empty the measuring cup in there and make a note of the mass that was actually in that 1/3 of a cup or 1 cup or whatever it was. Make a note of that mass and then write that out on your plan, and then going forward, just pour the contents of the container directly into the bowl until you get that mass reading on the scale. Now, similarly, for something like oils, if you're adding oil to a chicken meal, or if you're adding some coconut oil to a protein shake or something like that, just put your shaker cup on the scale, zero it out, and add in 15 grams scale weight per tablespoon that you want to add to it. And keep in mind, a tablespoon is made up of 3 teaspoons, so you would add 5 grams or 10 grams for 1 or 2 teaspoons, respectively. Now, for peanut butter or similar things, what you want to do is put the jar on the scale, zero it out, and then simply spoon out the mass that you want until you get a negative reading on the scale. So for example, peanut butter is typically about 16 grams per tablespoon. You always want to double check the labels on this just to make sure. What I would do is put the jar on the scale, zero it out, and reach in there with my spoon until I get negative 16 grams, and then I know I've got a tablespoon. I can just probably eat it right off the spoon rather than actually getting a tablespoon dirty and having to clean it out and go through all that hassle. Tip number 3, flavor is your friend. Now, meals that are going to be mass produced are not typically going to be super fancy, but they also don't have to be super bland. So let's pull out your herbs, pull out your seasonings, and use them, and condiments too, please. So one thing to remember is that in bodybuilding, sodium is your friend. We've been conditioned for years through TV and media reports to treat sodium as an enemy, something that's to be avoided. And you know, there certainly may be some exceptions, but likely sodium is fine for you unless your doctor has specifically told you otherwise and that you should try and limit your intake. As bodybuilders and athletes, we lose a lot of sodium when we sweat, and it's an element that really aids in performance, muscle contraction, fullness, and hardness. So be consistent with how you use it, but by all means, use it. So depending on what the meal is, there are a lot of things that I like to add to these. These are things like soy sauce, Frank's hot sauce, mustard, ketchup, although you should be careful with that one just because it is a little higher in sugar, Trader Joe's everyday seasoning, garlic salt, cinnamon for oats or cream of rice, dill for eggs, good old-fashioned salt, sugar-free options like sugar-free syrup, and a wide range of zero-calorie Walden Farms products are great macro-friendly alternatives to higher-calorie options. When in doubt, check the label and just make sure that anything that you're adding is relatively low in carbs and relatively low in sugars as well. Simply because as condiments, things that you're simply using to make something taste better, those things can add up very quickly if you're not careful. Tip number 4, potato conundrums. Potatoes can be challenging for a few different reasons. There's so many ways to prep them, and it's also one of those foods where, you know, it makes just as much sense to do them one at a time as it does to batch prep several in advance. So what's best? Personally, I recommend batching them out ahead of time. The only reliable macronutrients available for potatoes are after they've been cooked, simply because the moisture content in a potato can vary wildly from one to the next. So you don't know if your 12-ounce potato over here raw is going to cook down to 11 ounces or all the way down to 7 or 8 ounces. So I find it best to just batch several in advance and then portion them out after they've been cooked. Also, there are several ways to cook them. So I recommend stabbing the hell out of them with a fork and then microwaving them. About 7 minutes for one that's, you know, a bit thicker in diameter, and 4 to 5 minutes for something that's a little bit smaller like a red potato. You can also stick them in the oven if you've got like an hour to spare, or you can put them in the air fryer as well if you have one of those, and if you're not adverse to doing a little bit of prep and chopping them up so that they cook more evenly in a shorter amount of time. And also, don't forget, eat the skin, it's good for you. Tip number 5. Have a plan B. Now, I know we all like to be super organized and totally on the ball all the time, but let's face it, we are human beings, we forget, we screw stuff up, and it happens. You know, it's time to eat, and oh God, the chicken isn't done in the slow cooker for another 2 hours, or oh, I've got to batch up some rice and I'm already behind on my meal times for the day. So keep easy, quick options on hand for those situations when you find yourself in a pinch like that. Things like pre-cooked chicken breast strips, Uncle Ben's ready rice, rice cakes. Those are all foods that I keep on hand regularly, and I'm not necessarily having them every day, but if I'm forgetful or just a little bit lazy, it can really get me out of a bind. Not that that ever happens. And surprise, bonus tip, meal prep bags. So realizing that most people will leave the house in the morning when they go to work or go to school, you've got to have a way not to just take a few meals with you, but also to keep them cool throughout the day. So that's where meal prep bags come in. Now, you could spend anywhere from $30 for an off-brand refrigerated bag that's going to keep a couple meals cool throughout the day, all the way up to $400 if you wanted to go all out and get a fancy designer backpack that's going to hold a change of clothes, 6 meals, have a padded compartment for your laptop, and more. So look into offerings from Six-Pack Fitness, Fitmark bags, Isolator Fitness, and also you can just go onto Amazon and search meal prep bags for some less expensive options. So those are my top 5 tips for stepping up your meal prep game. Now, there are so many ways to go about doing this that I know it's just a matter of time before we're back here with another round of tips. So if you like this video, please hit the like button down below, leave a comment, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel. All of that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you for watching, and I will see you here in the next video.